Hello there, and happy Friday. Welcome to episode 14 of the Slice of Pie podcast. My name is Kat Loftus, and our podcast is about celebrating the people, places, and events in Pawleys Island, Murrells Inlet, and Georgetown. This week, our guest is Miss Lee Brockington. Lee is a celebrated historian, storyteller, wife, and mother, and just a great person all around. And we're so glad she lives in Pawleys Island and is helped us to learn more about our area and just been such a great resource for all things Pawleys Island and all things South Carolina. So I can't wait to hear from her, and I can't wait to share with you what she has to say. She's a truly amazing lady. Also this week, I want to give a couple of shout outs. So from our Pawleys Island P. Sotheby's office, Luke Gordon is one of our realtors. And in addition to being a realtor, Luke Gordon is a championship surfer, and he is an guitar player in the band Winyah. Thomas Rowland created, I think he's the founder of the band Winyah, and Luke is in his band. I think Rob Buffington's in the band too. But anyway, they're going to be playing tonight in the Greenville Country Music Fest out in Simpsonville. And if you're up in the Greenville area and you're looking for something to do tonight, please go listen to the Winyah band. I think they're going to be performing on one of the stages around 9 p.m. But I just want to give a shout out to Luke, and I hope he has a great performance tonight. I know he'll do well. So go check out the Greenville Country Music Festival. Also going on this weekend is the Georgetown Wooden Boat Show. I'm going to have to read some of this. Our mayor and one of our realtors, Carol Giroux, and the city of Georgetown are hosting the Wooden Boat Show. It's the 34th annual Wooden Boat Show in historic downtown Georgetown, South Carolina. It's along Front Street, along the waterfront in Georgetown. It starts today with the Goat Island Regatta, I believe, and then continues tomorrow and Sunday. There's food, there's music, there's drinks, there's contests, there's things for children, things for adults, all kind of things to see at the Wooden Boat Show. It's something you always want to go to if you're in town for that. So check out the Wooden Boat Show this weekend. There is a website you can go to for the Wooden Boat Show, and they also have a Facebook page. So look at either one of those for a schedule of events. What else did I want to say? So Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Oh, and my favorite event is the wooden boat building contest. It's a challenge, and it starts at noon. And the people who are participating in it have till 4 p.m. to build their boat. And then at 5, they have a rowing contest. The people have to get in the boat they built and try and row across the water right there to see if the boat is seaworthy or not. So that's always something that people want to see. It's highly entertaining, and I hope I can see that tomorrow. Also, I don't know if you know who Creighton Waters is, but he was the lead prosecutor in the Murdaugh murders case. And Creighton Waters is in a band called Soul Purpose, and the Soul Purpose band will be performing tomorrow night at the Wooden Boat Show. So if you haven't caught that band yet, you might want to go to the Wooden Boat Show and catch Creighton Waters and his band. Let's see. Also, the featured artist this year at the Wooden Boat Show is Kelly Atkinson. So she'll be in one of the tents signing her posters. There'll be T-shirts. Kids Model Boat Building author Rebecca Bruff will be signing her historical fiction book, Trouble the Water. There'll be hot dogs, perlos, food truck, just something for everybody. So make sure you check out the Wooden Boat Show. And Sunday, I think they're going to have a dog parade if you want your dog to be in the dog parade. I want to give another shout out to some of my artist friends who are having an event this week. It is called Pawleys Palette, organized by artist Braden Graff, and it is featuring several local artists. It's going to be this Wednesday, October 25th from 4 to 8 with the art and wine reception. Then Thursday, October 26th from 9 to 6. It's the art market. If you know where Quigley's restaurant is, they have another part on the side. It's like Quigley's on the side. And that's where the Pawleys Palette art exhibition is. Just so much beautiful art. I know some of my favorite artists will be there. So go check that out if you're in town for that. So thank you for listening to all these shout. Oh, one more shout out to my dear friend, Lisa McKiernan, who lives with her husband, John, up in Greenville, South Carolina. They used to live down here in Litchfield Country Club, and Lisa and John and their children, Madeline and Patrick, had to move away several years ago. But she's been a fan of the podcast, and she's been listening, and she called to give me a thumbs up today and say she'd been listening. So, Lisa, thank you so much for the encouragement. We hope to see you back down here at the beach soon. So, sit back. So, now it's time to watch the podcast. So, sit back and enjoy episode 14 of a Slice of Pie podcast. So, today we have with us Lee Brockington. Hi,
Hey,
and
Kat.
Lee is here with us for episode 14 of a Slice of Pie podcast. Lee, thank you so much for joining us and taking time out of your busy day. How are you doing?
Well, I love slice of pie because nothing could be better than Pawleys Island pie.
That's right. I love Pawleys Island pie. So, Lee is so well known as a historian and a storyteller. And at Hopcott, I don't know if you were a naturalist, but you've worn so many different hats and been a great mom. So there's a lot of questions I'd like to ask about you and your growing up life. So can we start with where you were born and where you went to school?
Yes, absolutely. My mom and daddy settled in Columbia after World War II. So we were, Mama's family was from Clarendon County and Daddy's people were Williamsburg County. So, you know, when you say where are you from, it goes back X number of generations when you ask a Southerner.
Yeah.
But I grew up in Columbia and I went to Brennan, Hand, and Dreer. And then when college time came, I didn't want to go to USC. It was too big. And so I went to my mother's alma mater, lived on campus at Columbia College. And I cherish those friendships so very much. Columbia College fighting koalas.
Oh, yes.
And loved growing up in Columbia because our property was just outside the city limits and right next door to a breeding farm, thoroughbred racehorses.
Oh, wow.
What a perfect life.
Wow. So what did you major in college?
Well, I found my major finally, senior year. Columbia College created a new major just in time for me, and it was called Public Affairs with an emphasis in historic site administration.
Wow, sounds like that was tailor-made for you. Okay. All right.
And I did an internship my senior year in college at Historic Columbia. And I did one semester, loved it. They let me do a second semester, you know, for course credit. And then for a woman who had no major for, in essence, 3 full years, and then claimed a major, I was really lucky to have a job in my major when I graduated. And a lot of people remember what a big deal, what a big worry that was when we were nearing the end of our senior year.
Yes.
So I felt pretty good when I graduated. And also those 3 years at Historic Columbia as a curator taught me so much. I loved it. It was really good times. And I still go and visit the staff at Historic Columbia and take visitors to those 3 house museums in Columbia pretty often.
So then tell us how you moved from Columbia to South. Did you move, first of all, from Columbia to Pawleys Island, or did you make some stops in between?
That's the only move I've ever made. I thought about that the other day, and I said, wow, Columbia, Pawleys Island, and only rented one apartment my entire life. But it was a visit night. Well, I began coming to Pawleys Island in the summers. My aunt's family and my uncle's family, the Brockingtons and the Jenkinsons, owned a beach house on the north end of Pawleys. They built it about 1970. So from about age 10 on up, I'd come in the summers. And like a lot of people, woo, you think you own the place. You think you know everything because you come one whole week.
Did you go to King's Funland?
Did go to King's Funland and jump on those trampolines. And then also Roberta Prelo sold me a snow cone. And I knew Roberta from Columbia. And we would walk to Howdy's and buy a bag of ice and run home and give it to Mama for the midday meal. And back then, the midday meal, even though it was hot at the beach house, that was the big meal. Fried shrimp, fried flounder. And then just loving Pawleys Island, coming a few times on the off season as a grown up. And in 1983, I had my first visit with a man who was real interested in feral swine. And we got an appointment with a wildlife biologist at Clemson. And we're sitting in his pickup truck. He's driving. My friend is on one side of me and I'm in the middle. And I asked a million questions. I was so curious about this place that I thought USC owned. But because the wildlife biologist said he worked for Clemson, I thought, oh, maybe it's owned by Clemson. And by the end of that time, I did find out it was all privately owned, but there were so many untold stories. And I started thinking in late 1983 about leaving my job in Columbia and coming to work at Hobcaw Barony, which I did on April Fool's Day, 1984.
Okay. So let's go back to that term feral swine. For our listeners who may not understand what that
Mm-hmm.
is, we just use layman's terms what feral swine is.
Yes, feral swine are wild hogs, but not to be confused with wild boar, which were imported from Russia and Europe for hunting. We didn't need to import pigs. We had feral pigs, like feral cats and feral dogs, once domestic, now wild. And Hobcaw Barony was almost overrun with wild pigs because development all up the Waccamaw Neck had pushed those hogs down to Hobcaw. So the reason my friend was interested in them meant that he had to meet with a wildlife biologist, and it meant I got to go too and sit in the middle. But, we wanted to take a tour. And the wildlife biologist said, if you take the tour, they'll answer your questions tomorrow. So I found out a lot about feral swine and venomous snakes and Clemson's forestry research and USC's marine biology research. But the thing that I was most interested in, ecology, yes, and I did do a lot of work with nature and nature studies, but also I was hearing a lot about Bernard Baruch, the Wall Street millionaire. I was hearing a lot about Churchill, who came and stayed at Hobcaw Barony. Then I heard about President Roosevelt, who came and stayed a month during World War II. But I'm like, now, who was Belle Baruch? Tell me some more of that. Now, who lived in these former slave villages? Tell me more about that.
So were you asking all those questions in 1984 when you first came here? That's when you're asking those questions?
In 83, I was asking questions.
Okay.
In the fall of 83, I visited.
Yes.
And then got the job because I wanted to tell the untold stories in 84.
Okay. So you were hired at Hobcaw. And what was your title?
My first title, I believe, was education assistant.
Okay.
And then education coordinator.
At the little center they have there?
And it was even smaller. What we know today as the Hobcaw Barony Discovery Center was just a little 1,500 square foot building at one time, and it had just opened about a year and a half when I got the job there, first as an education assistant.
Well, I've had the pleasure of listening to you and some of the talks you gave, because as a mother of our four children, sometimes I would accompany the class on a field trip, or as a teacher at Waccamaw Elementary, I was able to join my class. Our class would come down there and listen to you. You did an excellent job, not only in the, is it called the Discovery Center? But also out at Friendfield Plantation. And if our listeners don't know, at Hobcaw Barony, there are some former slave homes there, and the church. Is the church still there?
And the church is undergoing restoration right now as we tape.
But the information that you shared about each one of those slave homes and where the family slept and where the children slept and how every inch of that home was used and how they used it was unbelievably interesting. And so can guests still go and take that tour and learn about Friendfield Plantation? Maybe?
Yeah, you and I were on a field study, which was offered to school groups.
Right.
And the field studies continue and are a high priority. In fact, the field studies began before there was ever even an education center. The founding educator, Wendy Allen, started that.
I remember Wendy Allen, yes.
Absolutely. And the field studies take us out into places where the schools are focused on marine science, forestry, or social studies. And my area was social studies, although I could teach forestry and teach biology and wildlife biology while we were out, and certainly talk about forestry and timber and pine and cypress. And all of it's connected, and that's one reason we call it ecology, because when you study ecology, it's talking about all the connections, and the environment influences the culture is what we learn right away when we start studying history. I think one of my best days in my entire career as a museum educator was the day that a school group had come, third graders, and a boy named Tyrone was skipping back to the school bus. And Tyrone said, "Miss Lee, I sure had a good time." But as an educator, you want to know if it was value. So I said, "Tyrone, tell me one thing you learned today." And Tyrone said, "Well, I learned slaves had children." And just like you and I had that moment, like, really? And I said, "Well, Tyrone, what do you mean?" And he goes, I mean, I guess I always knew that. I just never knew slaves had children." And when he said that, it struck me as how very important these field trips are. to experiential learning, we call it, but to take the field trips. And because those structures are still standing, educators have a chance to take the children inside, just like you said. We talked about children's daily lives, what they ate, what their chores were, how they responded to their parents, their brothers, their sisters. And then in the 20th century, when those slave descendants had a chance to go to school, they walked to a one-room schoolhouse supplied by Bernard Baruch and later Bell Baruch. And to think that this boy said, I sure had a good time. Tell me one thing you learned today. I learned slaves had children.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And I came home and I told my husband, if I die today, I die happy. He's like, what?
I love that.
But
well, I'm trying to understand where he was coming from. So when we picture slaves or seen any pictures drawn of slaves, we think of them working. They're working in the fields. They're working in the homes. They're working, doing something. So we always think of them as workers.
yes.
But rarely do we think of them with their own families at home, eating a meal or having small children or raising those children. So I get exactly where he's coming from. There aren't a whole lot of pictures of slave families sitting together as a family. We mostly think of them as workers. So I think that's great, a great part of that tour from Field Plantation, that we can see that the slaves did have their family life.
We think
humble
of
as
them
it
as
was.
workers, and then, even they're not seen, they certainly were not seen as human beings for so long. And then I think the other thing, by the time you and I were in high school, in college, and we were studying slavery or plantations, and of course slaves existed in many large cities, north and south. Each state outlawed slavery in their own time. And then by 1861, of course, it led to war in the South. But slaves had existed in Pennsylvania, New York. The thing that I think about, too, is we were in high school and college learning too much about the economics of slavery, the politics of slavery. But you nailed it when you said very rarely did we hear, much less see, of slave families, of children, of mothers. So thank you for understanding
Singing,
that.
Making any crafts that they make, cooking, all their culture.
Discipline.
Yeah, all those things. But
there's a whole chapter in Dr. Charles Joyner's book, Down by the Riverside, called Leisure. And the first time I opened up that book in 1984, it had just come out. It's like, leisure. Slaves had leisure?
Right.
So there's just a lot to think about. And here on the Waccamaw Neck, here in Georgetown County, we have places like Hobcaw Barony where you can go, regular tours, about 10 or 12 a week, field studies for school groups, and in addition to that, a number of special programs that are offered by the staff. So private property with public programs, lots of access through programs.
So if anybody that's listening to this would like to go take that tour, do they go online or do they call up Hobcaw? How do they sign up for one of those tours?
They can do it either way, www.hobcawbarony.org or 843-546-4623.
So good for you for remembering the number. Okay, so how long did you work at Hobcaw?
Oh, I started in 84. I took a few years off in the 90s to raise two boys, and then went back in 2001. And so all in all, about 30 years at Hobcaw, and then about 40 years in the museum education field, about 40 years, and I'm still in it.
Okay, before we go further, Lee, I want to stop you because I meant to ask you about your family here, your family here. So let's talk about Bill and the boys. So how did you meet Bill?
Well, and your timing is perfect because I came to work at Hobcaw and had worked there a number of years before I stood in the Marlowe's grocery store and was introduced to Bill.
At Marlowe's grocery store, which is now
Frank's Restaurant.
Yes. So you met Bill at Marlowe's grocery store.
It was on Sunday. It was after church. I'd been to the brand new St. Paul's Waccamaw United Methodist Church.
What year was this?
1987 is when we met.
Okay.
And I'd helped found that church along with others.
Okay.
St. Paul's Waccamaw Methodist. And then Bill came in after church. He was a divorced father with full custody, and he was raising at that time two children, Lee, a girl, and a boy named Clay. And they came in, and every Sunday after church, if they were good, they got to buy a bag full. Woo! Penny candy.
Oh, yeah, penny candy.
And how about me standing near the door, standing near Miss Marlowe, getting to watch him, and I was holding a newspaper, and I could watch him over the paper and then read the paper. Watch him over the paper, read the paper. And then Mrs. Marlowe introduced us, which is always a nice thing. And then as soon as he left, she told me all about him.
Okay.
And then the next day when he came in the store, she told him all about me.
Okay.
And she and Mr. Marlowe continued to matchmake. And by the time we got married in 1990, after Hugo, the first couple to be married in the Pawleys Island Chapel after Hugo, we gave Mr. and Mrs. Marlowe front row seats.
There you go. So y'all were married in the chapel. 1990. I love that. And it's, gosh, it's so great that the chapel wasn't washed away with Hugo.
Well, it was damaged. It was damaged heavily, and they completed the restoration work Friday at 4:59, and we walked in at 5 p.m. for our rehearsal.
So you were married on Saturday. Your rehearsal was on Friday. Then
the workers had just finished the restoration of the chapel.
Which month was this?
We were married in April.
Okay.
I wanted to be married on April 1st, April Fool's Day.
You're into that date now, girl.
But Bill said no. So April 7th.
So you were, Pat and I were, no, I met Pat that year, but y'all were married in 1990. Okay.
Yes.
So you're married in 1990, so you have an immediate family, right? Okay. And then how old was Clay at the time?
Clay was just starting, he was starting first grade when we met, and in third grade when we married. And then Lee decided she would go live with her mother. And so we had Clay, raising him together, and then we had Brock together. So Bill and I raised two boys, Clay and Brock, here at Pawleys Island, which was my dream come true. I think when a lot of people our age grew up watching television, they saw the Country Time lemonade commercials and that kind of yard with grandparents and parents and children and nieces and nephews and cousins, big tire swing and shady trees. That's pretty much all I ever wanted. And that is certainly what Bill Sheehan gave me as a bride, as a mother, as a wife. It was idyllic. And we love a big yard, and we always enjoyed having birthday parties. And
you had great birthday parties.
And youth group coming over from the church. And we're just talking hamburgers, hot dogs, and lemonade. It was not catered. No, it wasn't anything fancy.
You're mostly there for just the people.
And if I did have something fancy, like jerk chicken cooked on the grill, well, I still had everybody bring a covered dish. And my poor mother, oh my goodness. I said, Mama, that's how we do it at the beach. We provide the meat, and then everybody brings covered dish. It's how it's done at the beach. And depending on what your budget is, it's a great way to entertain. Have people bring their own food.
I love covered dish suppers. I just love the variety that shows up, and it's usually delicious. So I mostly want to talk about you, Lee, but I do want to just stop here for just a second and talk about Bill Sheehan. He's such an interesting man. I mean, I know now Bill worked with the power company. Is that right?
He did. Okay. He was nicknamed the Santee Cooper Man because for so long you really just had two people that were assigned to the Waccamaw. And Bill was not an engineer, but his title was Area Service Representative.
Okay.
So he eventually, he was a lineman first, and then within a short time, he was the area service representative. And I love to say from Wachisaw to Hobcaw.
Yeah.
But the Waccamaw Neck. And that also meant that in his career with Santee Cooper from about 1975 to about 2000, he went through many big hurricanes, storms.
That's what I was going to say. Gosh, I guess he had to help bring the power back so many times.
Yes.
Wow, thank you, Bill.
And it really, we were engaged in 1989 when Hugo hit September.
Yeah.
And it was, but you just put one foot in front of the other.
Did y'all stay or did you evacuate?
Oh, well, we stayed. We hadn't had enough storms where the average person thought of evacuating. Living across the street from Frank and Faye Marlowe, I said, what are y'all going to do? Oh, we're going to stay. And, they stayed over on the mainland instead of out on the island where I lived also. Bill could not leave, of course, and so I took his children and I went to a brick house in Hagley where I was house sitting for 6 weeks by coincidence. A nice brick house with an interior chimney. So we felt safe during Hugo. And he was at work before daybreak. He was in charge of not only a large crew, but also many of those trucks that some of us remember coming from Georgia and Florida to help out. And, during that time, we hardly spoke. I was busy at Hobcaw because it was damaged heavily. I was on town council before and after Pawleys Island Town Council, so I had a lot of work to do there. But also, Clay could come with me and he had to come with me, and he also had to see the damage. And it gave us a chance to talk about things and to talk through it. And gosh, I don't remember, but they were out of school at least 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of time spent together, seeing things and thus talking about things, understanding about disasters. And I think it's important that children see some of it as opposed to being kept away from the horrors of life.
To see the damage and then to see the results of hard work recovering from the damage.
Good.
That you can make your way through that and you can be successful again.
That's exactly
with hard work.
I'm going to start saying that because that's important.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget being in the old Farmer Jack's grocery store.
Farmer Jack, yeah.
And a bunch of us were in there,
was it A&P at first and then it became
I think it was Farmer Jack's first, and maybe by Hugo it was A&P. But we were in that store, and what did anybody really need? A lot of us that were shopping were buying candy, just Coca-Cola. But we just wanted to go somewhere and talk with other people and find out their news. And all of a sudden, in that dark grocery store, and they were trying as quickly as they could to get rid of things that needed to be refrigerated or anything that might spoil, bread and milk. And
was that before the storm?
This was right after the storm, like a week after. Okay. So we're standing in the store a week after and getting the news of how bad was your damage, how bad, and all of a sudden the electricity came on. And we cheered, and I went running outside, and I saw the Santee Cooper trucks out on the highway, and it was sort of like commercials in slow motion. I was running toward Bill, and I was so excited, and I knew he was excited.
Yeah.
And that was one of the last connections for, they did hospitals, and they had a priority list.
Yeah.
And certainly grocery stores were in that first week.
Yeah.
And his crew was so happy, and so were we as shoppers.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, so that's what he did. But I also know that Bill did a lot of work with the local Boy Scout Council.
Yes.
So, because I know a lot. Let's see, Brock was in that, along with Parker Cromley and some other boys.
Matt Mims, yes.
Yeah, Matt Mims. What church was it out of?
Bill was scoutmaster at Troop 360 out of Pawleys Island Presbyterian when Clay was coming up and studying to be an Eagle Scout. And then when Brock came along, Bill was an assistant scoutmaster at Blaine Methodist Church in Murrells Inlet. And then Brock became an Eagle Scout there, along with Matt and Parker. And when Brock got married this past New Year's Eve, his groomsmen were Parker and Matt, and his best friend since second grade at Waccamaw Elementary, Garrett Feinbrink. So how beautiful that these early friendships, just like his friendship with Patrick, your son, have meant so much. And, Pawleys Island still, despite the change and the growth, is still very much of a small town.
It is.
We still stop and talk in the grocery store, don't we?
Absolutely. Okay, so and one of the great things, Bill's done so many things for our community. I know he had a motorcycle he liked to ride, right?
He had a motorcycle briefly, kind of a midlife crisis.
Yeah.
I think when Clay got a motorcycle at the College of Charleston, Bill remembered having had an old Indian years ago.
Yeah.
And he went out and bought a Honda, and I rode on it sometimes. But it wasn't my favorite mode of transportation. I much prefer a car or a horse.
Yeah.
Or a boat, but not a motorcycle.
So, and Bill was also he's a craftsman too, right?
He loved to do art.
Yeah.
And here in our house, we've got some paintings. We've got some sculptures of herons and egrets and ibises. And
did he do these that are on the mantle?
He did.
I might turn the camera up that way for just a little bit so we can see some of those.
He had always had great admiration for Alvin Outlaw's work. Alvin Outlaw, a wood carver from Georgetown.
Right.
And he took a class or two from Alvin Outlaw, the late Alvin. And I think in class they may have worked on some little hillbilly men or little hound dog, and then also a decoy. So Bill did several decoys that are here in the house. And then Bill especially got interested in the herons and the egrets. And then, he built our house. He anything that was needed, he would scrap around for materials and build it. I had lots and lots of art that I'd bought, but he's the one that made the frames for it.
Wow.
So while he's making all these picture frames, he starts looking at these canvases and said, well, maybe I can paint. And he took a few classes through Linda Ketron's Artworks and different instructors like Barney Slice and Danny McLaughlin.
Yes.
And he had done things in oils, in acrylics, and he'd tried his hand at watercolor. and probably felt like he was better at acrylic than the other two. Those were hard. Also, he was at a certain age, and he shocked me. He signed up for guitar lessons.
Oh yeah.
And he learned to play guitar. And we sat around the fire with a group one time, and he played a song, and he goes, "Okay, now, did y'all recognize that one?" Well, I thought he'd played Amazing Grace. My mistake. It was, "Oh, when the saints go marching in." So he was playing a little slow and a little carefully. I wouldn't say he mastered the guitar, but he had enough interest in it to learn. And heck, I can't even play music.
Yeah.
And I went to Columbia College.
Well, and then I think, and if you want to see something very interesting that Bill made, go over to Waccamaw High School, and you have to see the humongous big totem pole.
You are so good.
I love that totem pole. So if you go inside the football stadium, there is oh gosh, how tall could the totem pole be?
You know, it is taller than a utility pole.
Is it 20 feet? Is it?
You know, I don't do distances very good, but however tall a power pole is, then add an eagle figure with wings on the very top of that.
Right.
And the exciting news is he did that with one of his scouts, Richard Rashid, who was doing it as his Eagle Scout project. And then Richard and I recently got to see each other. And then out of the blue, days after talking with Richard Rashid about how much fun the totem pole was to do, he and Bill, young scout going for his eagle, contacted me and told me that he is refurbishing the totem pole.
Like restoring it or something?
Restoring it. And he got in touch with Richard Rashid and got all the original paint colors, etc. And Sherwin Williams here at Pawleys Island worked so closely with Richard Rashid and with Nathan Wesley.
Nathan Wesley, yes.
And doing such a good job. And I think he's just completed it. And just like I said, living in a small town, Charles Swinson of the Coastal Observer did an article 11 years ago on Richard Rashid and Bill Sheehan building the totem pole. And then last week, I got to join Charles Swinson and Nathan Wesley at the totem pole once again, as Charles Swinson writes an article on Nathan's Eagle Scout project.
So did it get rededicated or represented? Or?
I think it will. It hasn't yet, but it will. They just finished the work. But again, living in a small town, as big as you want to think we are, we really are still a small town. And I can't say enough about our weekly newspaper. I do meet people sometimes that don't get the subscription. And I say, well, even if you think you're reading it all online, take a subscription as a thank you for them coming when you ask them to cover something at your church, at your school, at your club. They're still covering the golf champions at all of our local golf courses. So
listen, and don't forget the police blotter, as everyone's favorite. But Lee, I have to say one thing about living in a small town with a great newspaper like that. Your child or your children were going to get featured at some point. And just how many clippings did we cut out of the Coastal Observer and save in our children's scrapbook from
I still have the files. Yes. I think I have a picture of your son because he was wearing the very first Crocs. No one had ever seen the shoes called Crocs until your son had a pair and would wear them. Was he a trainer for the football team? Patrick?
No, I think the first time I saw Crocs, Larkin Bruce had them on.
Was Larkin Bruce wearing them?
No, I don't know. But
were they orange? Maybe it was Larkin.
I probably would have gotten them orange since I'm a Clemson.
It was one of those cute boys that we all loved and liked to think as part of our circle. But I love thinking about when they were young and in the news on a regular basis.
It was
Coastal Observer.
I have saved all those clippings, and I still love reading it. I mean, I was just reading with interest about what was going on in Hagley, Heather Drive and everything. So if you want to stay caught up with what's going on, of course, I'm a realtor now, and they still have things about real estate, and the real estate transactions are published also. So
and the real estate ads keep our paper in business.
That's right.
Stop and think about it.
That's right. And then as we get close to summer every year, they publish that great insert about beaches.
Yes.
So everybody, if you don't know about things about Pawleys Island, could read that and find out about everything you need to know about beach season and about turtles. And so let's move on. So you're married to Bill. Bill does all these great things with the power company, with Santee Cooper, and then with the Boy Scouts. And then, unfortunately, Bill passed away not long ago. When did Bill pass?
He died on 1/1/1 in 2021.
So 2 years ago.
And I think about those numbers 111. I had a book sent to me after he passed away that talked about angel numbers and how important 111 was. He did have he had a series of falls, and it was several months before he was diagnosed with the brain tumor called glioblastoma. And that's the big brain tumor. And when they find it, there's little hope. Same kind of brain tumor that John McCain had, Ted Kennedy, Beau Biden, a number of people that live here also. By the time they finally discovered it, Bill could not absorb that information, and he lived thinking he was getting better and was going to get better. And while that sounds sad, it would have been much sadder had Bill known that he had a fatal brain tumor. Maybe I look at things with rose-colored glasses, but I always felt grateful in many ways that even though it wasn't found, we couldn't have done anything about it. It wasn't an operable brain tumor, even if they'd found it earlier. But it was as good as it could be. COVID had struck. He nor I ever got COVID. Both of our boys, as of November, when they diagnosed him, were able, because of COVID, to leave their work, and come and stay here at Bluewell Farm. Clay and his wife Victoria came. Brock was single at the time, and he came. And we alternated shifts. We alternated duties. The community was so good to us, bringing us food and liquor and wine and paper products. I don't have a washing machine or dryer. I had gone to the laundromat for 30 years by choice. We chose to do that, and I never minded. It was a little time to myself. And yet, when COVID strikes, you don't go to the laundromat, so you just hand wash things. I had good friends that said, you put your laundry basket on the front porch. I'm coming tomorrow. There are not many people that offer that, and there are not many times that you can feel comfortable saying, okay, I could go on and on. And I think part of it is connected to a church. I think part of it is connected to a school. I think part of it is just wanting to have friends and making friends and being friends. And it's important. That can happen in a large city as well as a small town, but it certainly happens in Pawleys Island. Bill was at home when he passed away. He had asked to be cremated and asked that his remains be taken to a small town in eastern Tennessee where he found out his people were from. Bill grew up in an orphanage in Virginia and never knew it until right before he got sick. He searched for his roots, and he found some living relatives, and that was a real important thing to him. And he found relatives, and we visited often, and then he has family members in a small cemetery there on top of a mountain in Erwin, Tennessee.
That's a lovely, lovely story. That's beautiful.
The Coastal Observer wrote the story up for our community, and it meant a lot. I think it meant a lot to other people who had grown up as orphans or estranged from family members, and he seemed to have a lot of people to talk to about that issue. But I grew up in a big family, so it was always hard for me to understand how anybody might grow up alone. But Bill did, and he overcame it. He had a different way of looking at life. He thought, instead of, pitying himself or feeling bitter, he just turned it outwards and feel like he was going to do as much good as he can for as many people as he could, everywhere he could.
Yeah, I always enjoyed being around Bill. He always had something positive to say. I like Bill a lot. Let's move on back to you now for just a second. So you were at Hobcaw for how many years?
About 30.
And so while you were there, you wrote a couple of books. Can you tell us about those, please?
Yes. I love writing books, and I think the very first book I did while I was working at Hobcaw Barony was on Pawleys Island. Gene Chase, a member of the Pawleys Island Civic Association, contacted me and said he had an idea to give out tape recorders and to tape record some of the people that have been coming to Pawleys their entire lives, 50 years, 60, 70. Our oldest interviewee was over 90, but we interviewed them, we transcribed their words, and then I created a book of oral histories called Pawleys Island, Stories from the Porch. It's a blue book with rocking chairs on the front, beautiful art.
That was your first book?
That was the first book,
okay.
And we're getting ready to reprint that, permission from Pawleys Island Civic Association, and the publisher will be Class Publishing, Linda Ketron. So look for that in the new year. Within a few years, it was time to do a brief history of Hobcaw Barony, and it's called Plantation Between the Waters. Great archival photographs that had just become available to us. And then another book on Pawleys Island, a big coffee table book, and it's still for sale. And it's called Pawleys Island: A Century of History and Photographs. And I did that with Linwood Altman, who was the long-serving president of the Pawleys Island Civic Association. And then another smaller history book with other rare photographs I did with Steve Roberts, and it's Images of America series, and it's simply titled Pawleys Island. Steve Roberts, I love to say, is the husband of Cokie Roberts.
Oh,
it's not often that we describe the husband by his wife's family.
That's right.
And he's famous, and he was an excellent writer and journalist, and is still a professor at George Washington University. But by the same token, so many people knew Cokie as a broadcaster, as a journalist, and they still own a home, or he still owns their home. He lost his Cokie about the time I lost my Bill, but their family beach house is on the north end, and it's always surprising how many well-known people who could afford to travel anywhere in the world choose to either vacation on Pawleys or to have a second home on Pawleys. It's amazing.
It is. It's always amazing. You never know. This quaint, humble little town, people just turn up because it's just authentic and it's just easy to be here.
And they want to buy books, so I'm so happy.
I'm
so happy that there's been a product. And
okay.
I've been affiliated with a few others, like writing an introduction for Tanya Ackerman's first book, just putting her gorgeous photographs in context.
And tell our listeners who Tanya is.
Tanya Ackerman had a career as an award-winning photojournalist, and then when she left her position at the Coastal Observer, she is a freelance photographer, and she creates memories as well as beautiful portraits of people, places, and times. And Tanya moved to our community, and I would say everybody has fallen in love with her and her photography. Not just her photography, but her too. She has an extraordinary life story of her own to tell.
Yes, she does. She does. And I believe she calls her social media page Chasing the Light. Is that her book, Chasing the Light?
Chasing the Light.
I think she might call her Instagram page Chasing the Light. And she does that. She is looking for beautiful times during the day when the light is just right for pictures. She also took Anna Margaret's graduation picture.
Good.
Just did a great job.
I think one of the things that we love about her work on Facebook, she posts a sunrise picture every day, and there just happens to be a couple that lives in Greenville that are older, and they can no longer drive and stay at Pawleys Island anymore, but they are able to go out to a breakfast restaurant in Greenville, and the waitress takes her telephone, goes to the to Tanya Ackerman's Facebook page every morning when the older couple comes in, brings up Tanya Ackerman's sunrise photo, walks over to the table with, let's say, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and shows them the photograph. And the waitress hears yet another story of when we used to go to Pawleys Island, when we used to go and fish and swim.
What a
and our
kind, loving act for that
And
waitress.
I just, it's Tanya's photography that does this kind of thing, that brings people together, whether it's about Pawleys Island or a fox or a turtle or a bird or a flower. She's an amazing horticulturist.
She is. She absolutely is. So remind me again, how many years were you at Hobcaw?
About 30.
30, okay. Now, in addition to that, in addition to writing books, you also are asked to speak at a lot of different events.
As a history consultant.
As a history consultant. And I believe you spoke somewhere today.
Yes, I did.
Where were you today?
I spoke to at Wachesaw. I was in the main Kimball's there at Wachesaw, and I was invited by the Wachesaw Historical Committee, because what they do several times a year is they have lectures or outings, experiential learning. And so I went, and then I met with the committee after the luncheon and the talk, and talked about some upcoming things this year. Tomorrow I will speak to the Traditions, the women's group, and we'll talk about traditional holiday decorations. Now, I won't be making any decorations, but we're going to be talking about native flora, why we have cedar Christmas trees, why we decorate with holly and mistletoe, but also everything has a Southern twist. What are our Southern traditions at the holidays? But I love to lecture on women's history, on African American history, small towns. I have a variety of things that I like to talk about And I always love it when a group says, we want you to speak, but we want, maybe can you speak on this or this or this? Because this is inspiration for me to do new research and then to do a new lecture. So as a history consultant, I'm still invited out to the schools. I'll be coming to Waccamaw Middle Career Day later on. Also, sometimes I'll talk out of town. In Columbia at museums. The Department of Archives and History has just asked me to come in February. I'm very excited.
Very exciting.
And
they're lucky to have you.
Yeah, and the Columbia Garden Club, they were celebrating their 100th anniversary, and that felt good to be at the lectern. They could just see me over the lectern.
How tall are you, Lee?
Well, I'm 4'10" and proud of it. But it was nice to see Mrs. Henry McMaster, South Carolina's first lady, in the front row seat, and my 3rd grade teacher and my 5th grade teacher and my high school teacher.
You're kidding me.
Well, I'm from Columbia.
Oh, wow.
And if it's the Garden Club's 100th anniversary, you know, all their past, present, and future members were in the audience there. So I love lecturing. I love doing programs. There are other consultants I know that go into courthouses, that go into archives and do that kind of research. I do enough research from secondary sources and using old photographs to try to create what I hope are good lessons. I lead tours at Arcadia Plantation, once owned by the Emerson and Vanderbilt families. Captain Paul Kenny and I have done boat tours in the past. We look forward to doing that again. Are y'all
still doing that?
We are on hiatus while the county figures out what they're going to do with commercial use of public boat landings. But things look promising for a solution, and we look forward to getting back to that. Paul and I have done river tours on the Waccamaw and the PD. We also do another tour that goes directly to Arcadia Plantation, where we get out and tour the plantation, the only boat that's ever gotten permission, the only tour that does that. And then also, about once a week in the high season, we were running a tour to Sandy Island, not only talking about Sandy Island and boating around it,
I'd love to
but we also dock, disembark, and then go eat midday meal with Laura Harriet at Wilma Cottage. So we try to do a lot of different things. A lot of times people will come to us with needs or desires and for where they want to go or what they want to do. And the same with me as an independent consultant. I can do a variety of things. And, you know, history and ecology. Remember, the environment influenced the culture.
Okay, so Lee, I've got a question. So if somebody had asked me about you, I'd say, oh, she's a historian about the Waccamaw Neck, but obviously I've got that wrong. So you do the Waccamaw Neck. Do you do all of South Carolina?
I can.
What are some things that you talk about? I mean, I just thought you covered our area.
Yeah, I've taught 6-week classes on South Carolina history. I've led field trips to Columbia, to Greenville and Clemson in one weekend, down to Beaufort, of course, to Charleston. I think the Low Country is Pawleys Island is my specialty. Broaden it to the Waccamaw Neck. Broaden it to Georgetown County. Broaden it to South Carolina. Kind of sort of the South in American history. Because South Carolina was such a big part of American history.
It has been, yes.
So depending on what the subject is, I feel comfortable talking about South Carolina and smaller, or Pawleys Island and larger. But I think there are others that can do the South and the country better. Plus, there's so many stories right here at home to tell. But saying I'm a historian is correct. And then saying, you know, historian is kind of like who I am. And then what is my current job? History consultant.
Okay, so can we give our listeners a treat? I remember hearing this at one of your talks, and I have always shared this with my students or people I know. So I remember hearing about what the word Waccamaw means. So will you explain to our listeners, where does the word Waccamaw come from and what does Waccamaw mean?
I have always been fascinated with the etymology of words. Ever since 8th grade, when the teacher told us that we were going to study etymology every Thursday, and I said, great, I love bugs. My first oral report in her English class was entomology, the study of insects, etymology, the origin of words. But it was that class at Hand Middle School that got me so interested in words. And a University of South Carolina professor and his wife, Dr. Claude Neiffer and his wife, did extensive research and publishing of words and place names. And names in South Carolina were published, and so many of the names are surnames. We know Charleston comes from King Charles II.
Mm-hmm.
We know Georgetown came from Prince George, who later would become king. But Native American names were of interest to so many of us, and many of them are lost to time. But due to Dr. Knifer's research and Chapman Milling, Red Carolinians, a big tome on Native American history, we realize that Waccamaw means coming and going, but not because of people coming and going, but because of the Waccamaw River being a tidal river. And when the tide changes and comes in twice a day, the river reverses twice a day. When the tide goes out, the river flows out twice a day, coming and going, coming and going.
And so the native Waccamaw tribe gave that name to the river, however they pronounced it.
You
right?
are good.
Okay.
Yes, we believe they pronounced it Waccamaw, almost a G sound for us.
Yeah.
But they named the rivers first. They named Winyah, which means the bend,
Okay.
and the tribe that lived closest to the bend in that big bay became known as the Winyah tribe. The Pee tribe along the Pee River became known as the Pee tribe. And the Waccamaw Indians, the Indians that lived closest to the river, became known as the Waccamaw tribes. So place name first, whether we're talking about a big rock in the upstate or if we're talking about a river in the low country. That's most often how those tribes got their names. And there were so many tribes and so many individuals when the colony was first founded. By 1720s, most of them had been pushed out of Georgetown County, what we think of as the county. And I wrote a column for the Sun News for a couple of years. And one of the first columns involved the Native Americans. I wanted to do a little history. And I wrote that the Native Americans had been decimated, that there were no more Native Waccamaw tribe members. Well, the phone rang the day after publication, and a man's voice said, "I need to speak to Lee Brockington." I said, "This is Lee."
Was it the chief?
It was Chief Buster Hatcher of the Waccamaw tribe.
Yeah.
And he said, "I just called to tell you I'm not dead." But you know what was so great? Rather than being confrontational, he said, "When would you have a free day to come up here and let me give you a tour of our tribal grounds, our cemeteries?" They had not purchased what we think of now as the tribal grounds for the Waccamaw people, but there were many areas where his family members, his ancestors had lived, and it was a great way to simply educate someone who didn't know. And remember the origin of the word decimate, deca. 1 in 10 survived. 9 out of 10 Native Americans were killed, but those who were left were pushed up into the PD area, over the line into North Carolina. Some may have merged with Cherokee or Lumbee, but today the Waccamaw Indian people do exist as a state-recognized tribe.
Oh, well, I thought our only state-recognized tribe were the ones in Rock Hill, which are the
Catawba are state recognized, but they're the only nationally recognized tribe.
Who, Catawba?
Catawba
is nationally, yeah, but Waccamaw,
to my knowledge.
So if you know, if you're listening, that Waccamaw means coming and going, because the Waccamaw River comes and goes every day with the tide that comes in and goes out. All right. So if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, Lee, to have you speak to their group, how could they get in touch with you?
The best way really is to email me at bluewhalefarm@gmail.com. Blue Whale Farm is the name of our little 4-acre property on Waverly Road. So my mailbox, if you forget my email address and you drive down Waverly, you'll see the mailbox, Blue Whale Farm, and my email address at gmail.com.
bluewhalefarm@gmail.com. And yeah, and I did enjoy driving up your driveway this afternoon to come interview you. It's just a really neat piece of property with neat little artworks and artifacts, and just different little spots where you have like a fire pit and some chairs, and just, I don't even know how you take care of this all by yourself, because it's a lot.
We always wanted a big yard. We had an acre, then we had a chance to add 3 more acres after my parents died, and we purchased the property with the idea of sharing it in mind. And even when Bill passed away, our Blue Whale Farm Fund enables me to hire Trey Altman to cut my grass.
Thank you, Trey.
He was in our youth group, so we love him so much. And also, Bill and I have been able to share it over the years for people that might need an outdoor place for a large family reunion, friends of ours that might need it for a rehearsal party, for a wedding. We had one wedding in the yard.
Very nice.
We've had several wedding receptions. And then just last week, Freedom Readers, last Sunday, a few days ago, borrowed my yard for the second time for their annual fundraiser, Books, Boogie, and Barbecue? Nope. I can't remember, but
booze?
no. Children's Fair.
Yeah.
And a dream came true with Beach Boogie and Blues. That's the radio. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But Freedom Readers had their great fundraiser, and they said they might be thinking about bringing a petting zoo, and they're planning for this past Sunday. And I said, oh, petting zoo. And they said we have kangaroos and pigs and goats and sheep. And I said, could we have pony rides? Their committee got in touch, and they brought a pony, and my dream came true. Children got to ride ponies in the yard. So I'm not going into the birthday party business or the petting zoo business anytime, but it was such a delight to do that with Freedom Readers. And the Friends of the Waccamaw Library has had fundraisers in the yard here. We love sharing it with people we know, and we don't rent it, we just share it. And it's, I think, especially now, it's everything Bill had hoped for when he first carved this 1 acre out of the woods, built a 2-story house, and then later, as we were able to buy the other lots next to us, that we might in turn share it with our community that's meant so much to us and done so much for us, that maybe we could give back to others that needed just a big country rustic yard to play in.
Yeah. So now you're doing a lot of speaking engagements, right? Do you spend a lot of time doing that? Do you do any writing? Are you doing some writing? Are you going to write another?
I'm working on a couple of books. We are reprinting Pawleys Island Stories from the Porch, as I mentioned, in cooperation with Pawleys Island Civic Association. It will be published by Class Publishing. And then an artist and I are in conversation about doing a book with her gorgeous watercolors and my text, and it'll be set on the Waccamaw Neck. And of course, nonfiction, good history, good ecology. And then a third book that I'm looking forward to do is in a really early stage, so I can't say anything about it, but 3 are on the horizon if I live that long.
Well, you will.
Yes.
So do you have any other goals in life? Anything else you'd like to accomplish? Any place you'd like to travel?
Well, people make fun of me. They say I'm never home. It's just that I don't post a lot of pictures when I'm at home doing nothing. But I do, since I retired and since COVID ended, so to speak, and since Bill passed away, I have gotten in the car or gotten on a plane or on a train and taken domestic trips. When I say I love to travel, that might be going to see my sons in Clemson or Greenville. It might be going to see cousins. It might be looking up and going to see old college chums or elementary school friends, and within the state. But also I drove to Washington last year, had a great 11 days in Washington, D.C. My sister's in Houston. I think about going to see her. So travel. Now, I might get to go to London or Paris, but right now I'm just hoping that I can see as much as I can by car, by train, by plane in my little budget. And I do enjoy especially seeing places, but people more than anything, connecting with old friends, making new friends. But that's a big part of my trips, is being able to visit, take friends to lunch, take them to supper. And if they invite me to stay, I'll say yes. But otherwise, I'm okay. I got enough in my budget to stay in a motel. But I do love to travel, and that's certainly more and more interesting places. As I get to the littler places, maybe I'll get to some of the bigger places.
It probably helps add to some of your stories that you have to tell.
It does, yes.
Lee, is there anything else you'd like to tell our listeners that I haven't asked you about?
Well, I think just depending on what our listeners are interested in, we have a great opportunity to move to this area, and whatever you're interested in, to take part in. There's no reason anybody has to feel lonely or sit at home. We were encouraging somebody the other day who's just recently gone through a divorce to move here because it's so much easier to meet people. And one of the first places you do that is at the library, the Waccamaw Library, right here on the Waccamaw Neck. Public programs, a friend center where you can go in and not just buy used books and items, but also talk to people and have conversations. You and I grew up with our mothers being very careful to say, don't talk to strangers. I have found all my life talking to strangers can be very, valuable and rewarding.
It can be exciting.
So I hope this community will feel the same to our listeners as it has to you when you moved here, to me when I moved here. An easy place to meet people, and also an easy place to learn and to give back to the community.
You know, in this age of technology and social media, I think it's now more than ever, people need to continue to make those real live face-to-face connections every day. That's what makes you feel good. Giving back to people makes you feel good. And those are the things that make life worth living, are those real life relationships face-to-face, and then the helping of others is what makes us really feel good. So
that's absolutely
and we
true.
really are so grateful to you and Bill and your boys for always doing that for Polly's Island. You really are become quite a central part of the fabric of Polly's Island and make it what it is. And we thank you for that. And we just wish you much more continued success and a long life here in Polly's. And I look forward to what you continue to do.
Well, thank you, Kat Loftus, for all you do, and especially for being a longtime friend of ours. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Lee. And I hope y'all enjoyed listening to episode 14, and stay tuned for more information after this. Didn't Lee do a great job? She speaks so easily. Words flow out of her mouth like honey onto a biscuit. She is just so easy to listen to and so entertaining. You're always going to learn something when you talk or when you listen to Lee Brockington. If you would like to get in touch with Lee to speak at one of your events, you can email her at bluewhalefarm@gmail.com. That's bluewhalefarm@gmail.com. Or if you'd like to take one of her classes, because she does teach classes here in Polly's Island, you can register for the class at www.class@pollys.com. That's www.class@pollys.com. Thank you so much for watching another one of our episodes. We're enjoying doing this every week and interviewing our friends here in Polly's and Merle's Inlet and Georgetown, and just learning so much about our area. You think you know everything when you live in a town for so long, and you always learn something new. So we hope you're enjoying this as much as we're enjoying making it. Let's see. We'll have some more guests next week. And until then, have a great week, and I hope your football team wins. See you soon.